Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to Better Life discussion. I'm your host. My name is Marcia Trajano, and with me again, love to have you back, Yuri Castro. It is so good to see you again. So, for those who do not know, Yuri is a clinical psychologist. He's also a spiritist like me and a member of the Conscious Living Spiritist group in North Miami in Florida. Um, if this is the first time that you're watching this podcast, please note that our program, The Psychology and Spirituality Weekly Talks, are based on the works by Joanna de Angelis, and we're here to offer us, right, Yuri, this space for us to maybe talk, compare, sift through concepts of spirituality as well as the psychological lens and how they come together and doing so to really help us lead a better life. That's the ultimate goal for all of us. Please note our program is sponsored by TV Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil. But Yuri, how you doing?
I'm very good. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. Awesome to have you back. So I was reading about the subject I would like for us to talk today, and found that last July, just a year ago, Georgetown University published this article about the neuroscience behind superhuman acts of generosity. And that same article referenced a paper that was published before about the same subject. And the paper and the article both shed light into why extreme altruists help strangers for no apparent reason, no benefit, nothing. They just give because they do, right? There's no receipt of any type, shape, or form of benefit. This study apparently is the first time to measure those so called extreme altruists' brain activity as they make those very generous decisions in real time, right? But Yuri, why are we even talking about altruism today? Why do you think is it easy to be generous toward family and friends, but not to strangers? What are your thoughts?
Yes, that's an interesting conclusion for an article that you mentioned. And to answer your question directly, I would say, at least from a psychological standpoint, altruism, there is a component of empathy, of being able to connect with somebody that's experiencing some type of distress or that's in pain and everything. So when we think about helping or connecting and being able to enact some change in someone's life, it's always easier for us to do that to those that we love, to those that are close to us, to those that live with us or are around us. And that could be family members, could be friends, could be the community. So it's no surprise to me, honestly, that the study, is saying that these people who are wired differently almost from a
Yeah,
neurological standpoint,
yeah.
because it is if we think about the component of empathy and having, one thing that I remember from altruism, from my psychological studies in the doctor program, was there's three components to altruism: is motive, means, and opportunity. And this is interesting for us to think about. And the motive here, if we are talking about helping or becoming, generous towards somebody that's close to us, somebody that we care about, it's always way easier to do that than
Mhm.
to do and then to become generous or engage in pro-social behavior, which is also another name for altruistic acts, towards those that we don't know. So the motive piece of this triad, let's call motive, means, and opportunity to engage in altruistic behavior, the motive piece is more salient in when we're talking about people that we know, people that we love, people we care about.
Mhm. And it's funny that it's almost looks like you're talking about a detective series or police serial. The what is it? The motive, the means, and the opportunity.
For
Okay,
altruistic behavior, yes.
I love it. I love it.
I didn't coin that, by the way. This is like studies that have said that you need motive, means, and opportunity in order for altruistic behavior to occur. And I thought that was interesting that when
Absolutely. So the
we're
motive you're talking about, the motive being, well, I know you, right? And I see your pain, I see your need. Let me do that versus the
Mhm.
unknown. But that research, Yuri, talks about those people. I think one example they give is to give, to donate a kidney voluntarily to a perfect stranger, right? Those
Uh-huh.
are the so-called extreme altruists. But if we see that this exists, right, this brain activity that they are indeed researching, have we come to this new paradigm that there are indeed some of us who genuinely cares about others regardless, or flip the coin, right? Or is the idea of the Good Samaritan, do you remember the parable of the Good Samaritan?
Yes.
Still so foreign to us. 2,000 years after Jesus discussed the so-called stranger on the road. Is this something still foreign was? What can we talk about it, Yuri? And is there something that perhaps the works by Joanna de Angelis can shed light on the subject?
Yes, I think there's a couple of different things that we can approach from what you mentioned. The first one, I think, is when you're talking about the donation of kidneys. It actually reminded me of an article that I read many years ago when they were
Uh-huh.
researching the neuroscience behind people who engage in these altruistic acts, the super altruistic acts towards strangers. And there was this one article that looked at the neuroscience behind kidney donators. So there's in the US, and at least this was in 2016, there were 150 people registered to donate kidneys to people they don't know. So they took these people to a lab, hooked them up to fMRI machines, and try to see their brain activities and all of that, and even from a structural standpoint, and through MRI. And
Uh-huh.
what they found was that there's this region, or I guess this little thing we have in our brains called the amygdala, which is a plum-sized thing, almost shaped.
Uh-huh.
And this amygdala, which is responsible for a lot of has a big emotional component, that plays a big emotional component in our brain, in our neurochemistry and neurobiology as well. The amygdala of those who are these super altruistic people, they are bigger, and that, compared to when they research people with like psychopathic tendencies, for instance, their amygdalas are smaller and less active.
Uh-huh.
And they found, and this was super interesting, because they found that having these larger amygdalas there are more active translates directly into their altruistic behavior, because they can connect with people's they can be more empathetic towards those that need a kidney that they don't even know. They have, this emotional component is stronger within them, so they become more altruistic. So even from a neurological standpoint, from a structural standpoint of our brain, we
Yeah.
can already see that there are these differences that we observe from people, and going to the other side of the spectrum, like sociopath or a psychopath, versus somebody that's super altruistic, that has everything to do with empathy. Their brains are different, and I think that's when you mentioned that study, that made me think of that.
Awesome. This is super cool. And maybe we can start or continue this discussion of altruism. Can we perhaps define it? What is the definition? What can we say? We don't have to define from a vocabulary
Uh-huh.
not a vocabulary, dictionary
Uh-huh.
perspective, but what can we say from a definition standpoint? What is altruism? Why altruism?
Yeah, sort of altruism, or what they call pro-social behavior. At least I can give you a little bit of the psychological, I guess, not the dictionary definition. I don't know that, but
Uh,
the idea of helping someone else helping someone else at some cost to oneself.
yes.
That's an idea, at some cost to oneself. And that's an idea that psychology explores a lot, as far as, altruistic or pro-social behavior being this, empathetic act towards someone else and in helping them. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes when we think of help, we think of people in distress, and there's where the amygdala thing comes into place, because seeing someone in distress generates an emotional reaction from us. Those who have more active and larger amygdalas, that reaction is going to be even bigger, therefore, and more potent, perhaps. And that will propel them to become more altruistic, to engage in these pro social behaviors, which are these acts towards others.
Can I say something that just came to my mind now, Yuri? The definition says to be altruistic is giving, but there is a potentially a negative impact, right? There's a sense of sacrifice, perhaps, and that immediately put me to think about the when Jesus talks about the widow's mite, right? Where she there's all those very rich people offering in the temple, and there's this little widow that comes in and she puts two little coins, and it's quite I'm being silly here, but pathetic, right? It's like, oh, what change does it do to you? But we often forget that it's not about um, a judgment of socioeconomic or sizes or anything, but it's the fact that in this case, that woman, as you know, the collection in the temple, right? People gave collection in the time of Jesus to exactly support women like this one that
Yeah.
have that are widow, and they need a structure within the community. Otherwise, the woman and even the children would suffer tremendously. So the idea that I receive, let's pretend now that you are a donor, right? You're putting your money there, and the temple then disseminates, distributes to people. I'm one of the people. So you give, let's say, 1,000. I get 10, right? I get 10 from the religious institution, and then I give back 2, which means I really did that as my own sacrifice. I'm doing because I can, right? And it really puts a different light to that parable itself, right? That the narrative from Jesus, but also to the idea for us, for why do we do this? Why? I know you talked about empathy, yes, but why are there people, and are we one of them, that really, um, while losing and being impacted negatively, still benefit from acts of altruism?
Yeah, that's an interesting one too, because even if we think, you mentioned the Good Samaritan as well,
Yeah.
the story, there was also cost involved there. To the
Hmm.
widow, there's also cost involved. So they are in a way sacrificing, and I love you use that word sacrificing. They are in a way, both of them are sacrificing something that's going to help someone else, and that there is a cost to them. And the idea, when he was comparing, the widow and everything, and how much can someone give, it goes back, I think, when you mentioned that,
Mm.
it made me think again of the motive, means, and opportunity. Having the means
Yeah,
to sacrifice yourself, to give what you have, and that is very relative. What is it that you have? What is it that you can actually give, right? So
absolutely. Yeah.
so I think it's very individual, and it's super interesting, because you mentioned the new paradigm when you're mentioning before, like, are we more altruistic now? What's going on? And I think, if Spiritism can bring light to that, and the fact that we're transitioning, the planet is going to the planetary transition, society is changing, like we're all changing, and there's this accumulated knowledge, perhaps, that we have gathered throughout multiple, the immortality of the soul, multiple reincarnations, and we can think of that we're learning these things, that are these, as Jesus says, these treasures that no thief can steal, and they don't accumulate rust, the true ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I go back to something you said?
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned that you love the word sacrifice, right? And I specifically like that word as well, but from a different perspective, which is the root cause, or the root word, sorry, the root word for sacrifice is sacred, right? Which really means divine. And the sacrifice is by giving, you attain a level closer to God, that sense of becoming sacred, becoming divine, becoming godlike in who you are, in your quote unquote, right? Air quote here, quote unquote, in your DNA. And I love that because perhaps for each one of us to think of this subject of altruism, and yes, it generates empathy. I agree to that without having to have read anything, but I agree. I know every time I was able to be altruistic, I there's this surge of empathetic and feeling well, right, Yuri? But perhaps in the idea that you post here, that idea of spiritual evolution and this path that not only we are taking, but also an entire planet, our entire orb, right? This
Yeah.
globe that we live, we're all becoming less material and more spiritual in our spiritual evolution. And that perhaps in this path of becoming more spiritualized, we also are able to sacrifice, meaning become closer to God.
Excellent. Love that definition. Yes, say the sacred becoming closer to God, because it
Mhm.
does connect very well to sacrifice. And Joanna in the book Plitude, she even talks about how it's about, like, she mentions generosity starting small. She's saying,
Yeah.
like, on chapter 6, she says, on chapter 6 she talks about how it starts with donating these material things, objects, utensils, clothes, food, etc.,
Mhm.
and then feelings, and then your time, and improving the art. She mentioned improving the art of serving until you can donate yourself, and that is
Ah,
beautiful for us,
beautiful.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Joanna, always so good with the words. In the end, donating ourselves. So first, we build it, just like with any skill, anything that we're learning as we progress through our multiple lives, starting small, starting, step by step, gradually, and that to the point where she says it's going to be the art of serving until you can donate yourself. And I think that is super powerful, and also connects with what you're mentioning about the sacrifice, sacred, being closer to God and closer to all these apostles, and to Jesus, our master, and everything that he sacrificed and everything that he donated.
Yeah. I was thinking just now, I don't know if it makes sense, so we're going to freeform here. All right. Just, I call this not fully baked food for thought. Recently, Yuri, I actually watched a series. I think it's Apple TV series, Becoming You. I don't know if you have seen it. It's
No.
really interesting. I highly recommend everyone because it's a short series on the first 2000 days of a child and how the child evolves, right? So it's each step of the way from 0 to about 5 years of age.
Okay.
And one of the things that it talks about is the fact that by year 2, we're now for the first time, and of course, he doesn't say on your second anniversary, but around the time, that child that was completely the self identity, right, was completely immersed in the identity of the parent, usually the mother, as one being. You cannot
Yeah.
dissociate,
Hmm.
right, me from the mother. But at some point, that in the series, it talks. It's just quite well put, where a baby is walking, or a 2 year old, right, walks with the mother, and they look at this wall that is a mirror, and they say, "Baby, mama, baby." So it's a baby. It's not me. It's the baby, and the mother is recognized. But at
Hmm.
some point, right, there's this magic that occurs that the baby finds this self identity. But, haha, with the me, a person, an identity, comes also this entire slew of unanticipated consequences of the so called terrible twos, right? It's me, 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 me. It's my. I don't know how to share. I cry about everything. It's all about me. And of course, from a psychological perspective, we're talking about the beginning of the egoic construct that is key in the psychological maturity that the child will go through in many different stages beyond the terrible twos. And my thought was at some point, the child overcomes that need to put everything in the world of me to become now the world of us, right? About 5, 4 years old, the social behavior, the immersed in a social ecosystem, if you will. And I'm thinking, Yuri, that perhaps this is us. This is where altruism, giving, right? Giving something at a cost to you, to another complete stranger, and becoming sacred, right? Become closer to the divine. We're also demonstrating the in that metaphor that I'm no longer the child that is in my 2-year-old self-absorbed, but now I am now able to understand the ego as well as the self, capital S, right, which is the spirit nature of who we are. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a good parallel that you bring because I can also think of spiritism. If you're mentioning something more related with psychology, but if we think about spiritism, all the orders of spirits and all of that, like how we're progressing in our spiritual journey, and we're infants basically. Like we're still very young and still very, flawed, and we're still learning so many things when we compare to those spirits that have billions of years already. Spirit like Christ, for instance, and all of those things. So we are very immature in that way. So yes, we're and these stages are interesting because you can't have a society without having the me, but you first need to have the me. But then there's egoic state that you're talking about, this differentiation between I'm an extension, because the baby thinks they're extension of the mother,
Yeah.
to I am my own person. But now it's like everything revolves around me, 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 this. But then after some point, there's this transition where now it's us.
Yes.
And making the parallel with like this microcosm of a couple of years in the span of a human life, with who knows how many thousands of years and hundreds of thousands of years, who knows, in the life of a spirit, of an immortal spirit. It's an interesting parallel because we can also see how we evolve from, from this unification to this individuation to the me, and
Yes.
then to the law of society, and how it's important, to foster those things. And the idea of the altruism, I think, ties very well with that. So I think it's a good idea you have baking there.
Let's cook it together, right?
Yes,
But tell me a little bit about because you said that Joanna de Angelis, in her book Plenitude, which by the way, it's the third book in her 16-book series of the Psychology collection, right? But in that book, which to me it's probably one of my favorites, by the way, she brings that idea of the components of altruism, including start small. It's okay, right? All in time. You don't need to become a super altruist and donate your
right.
brain.
Mhm.
but but you can do other things such as starting with look what you have. Look at your material items. Do you need that? I don't know. I'm just kidding here, but do you really need that bag that you bought in 1975 and you used once in 50 years, right? do you really need that? So it's just this idea that maybe we need to look at our things, our possessions, and give whatever we can, and then moving on into that continuum until you're able to give of yourself. But I really would like, if you could, talk a little bit about what it is to give of yourself. Are there any aspects that perhaps Joanna or you in your studies can talk about? This is an example of how I can be altruistic by giving myself to the other.
I think so, because in it's interesting you mentioned the gradual process, that she talks about in the book. Because oftentimes we try to have too lofty goals, and the
Yeah.
idea, everything is we build these skills, we build these practices little by little. So it starts with, maybe, like you said, find a clothes that you haven't used in 6 months. That's the cutoff in my household. If I haven't used something in 6 months, it's gonna be donated. Because if I haven't used in 6 months, I probably don't need it. It's an excess. So find what's in excess first. Remember the means, motive, and opportunity. Having that means, if I have something that is in excess here, maybe it's lacking for someone else. The material piece, could be money, could be monetary, could be material, could be also time. A lot of people have a lot of time that you can donate 10 minutes talking to someone, sending a message of love, doing a prayer. This is something, when I think of altruism, I think
Mhm.
if there's all these little things and different things we can do that are going to help someone else. A prayer coming from the heart, really connecting with God. We know the power of the thought, we know the power of the prayer through Spiritism, through Christian teachings. Maybe just doing a prayer for someone is a way to start small, but already, having a meaningful impact.
Can
So,
I can I can I add something here?
yes, yes,
My invitation here is to pray for stranger,
even
but
better.
right, but before you pray to that stranger, look that stranger in the eye without him or her knowing that you're doing that. To me, who are the invisible ones? The homeless, the people that serve you, the, I don't know, the person who's helping with the traffic or serving you at the restaurant. Just look at that perfect stranger, look in the eye, as in saying, I see you, and pray for that person at a different time. I think it's a wonderful way to do that.
Excellent tip. I think people should heed these, because it's definitely, it's something small and something that doesn't, remember we said it comes at a cost. The only cost that's associated with that is time. So for
Yeah,
somebody to, set aside maybe like 5 minutes of their day to do a heartfelt prayer for someone they don't know. Five
yeah,
minutes who doesn't have 5 minutes? So
yeah.
it's about, I think, again, practicing, because that's what's it's going to make it ingrained in us, and then we can be really altruistic by doing these small things that she talks about. And to comment on the second thing you mentioned about the different aspects of Joanna, that
Hmm.
on the book that she mentions, there's this gradual process, and you mentioned, like, it is, she says, until you can donate yourself. And one thing she says that I think connects really well with this is, in the book she says that, um lose to is it's a healthy strategy. She says, to lose what is small now to gain permanent results of significant value later. To lose what is small now to gain permanent results of significant value later. It's the same thing we mentioned about the treasures, like not having these treasures here on earth, but in heaven. So, like, accumulating these things that are really
Yeah.
going to take us to the next level spiritually. And being altruistic is definitely, the charity and all of that is definitely one of those things that are going to help us there. And I think it when we're talking about donating ourselves, that's what I think this is about. Is It's about losing something that's small now, perhaps, material things or time or whatever that may be, to lose something of significant value that is permanent afterwards. So when we donate ourselves, we think of all these these spirits like Mother Teresa, like all these Pichico, Divaldo, like all these people that really donated themselves for others, for a
Yes.
cause, for others. It, so I think
The,
that that's
yeah.
the connection, and that's a great bridge that she makes in the book, and specifically that chapter 6 that
Uh-huh.
inspires us, I think, to become more
Yeah.
altruistic, to donate ourselves, to eventually reach a point when we're serving and donating ourselves.
Yeah. And for those of you who do not know Divaldo Franco is the medium, the Brazilian medium that, in partnership with Joanna de Angelis, wrote through his mediumship those books. But that's not the whole story. Divaldo is a great disseminator. He devoted his life. He's in his late 90s, mid 90s now.
97, I think, yeah,
Oh
or
my
98,
goodness.
or yeah.
Still working, still traveling, still inspiring people. And in his charitable organization, I believe, he provides meals to about 5,000 children every day, 3 times a day. They do not only that, but a plethora of services that those individuals in the area that he created, his organization, would have not any other support. So it's beautiful what he's done. And the funny thing, Yuri, is that I don't know if you know this, but he started all of this, and this is what Joanne is telling. Start small, but he started all of this when he was only 19. So I pause here to ask you, who is listening to to this conversation, what were you doing, or if you're not there yet, what do you plan to do when you're 19? I always think about it because for me, on when I was 19, I was not thinking of any of these aspects of life. I was thinking about myself. I was thinking about moving on in life, getting ready to embark in my adulthood and going to college and my whole life ahead of me. But it was very self-centered still. So love to have that as for us to think about it, right?
And the fact that he didn't start when he was 19 giving meals to 5,000 children,
Yes, yes. Correct.
right?
Correct.
So again, you have to start somewhere. You have to start gradually.
Yeah,
And he's 97, I think, today. So when he was 19, it wasn't 5,000 children, 5,000 meals that he was doing. It was
yeah,
probably
yeah,
way less, or 10, maybe a handful, but he
yeah,
started, and he
yeah,
continued, through his work, through his persistence, through his like developing this altruistic behavior that we know comes already probably from other lives, that
yeah,
he's acquired these,
yeah,
this sacrificial, this self-sacrifice part of
yeah,
himself, so it's, but again, for those listening, it didn't start with 5,000. So think about
yeah.
it. He started small. Everything that we have that's grandiose in the terms of, we're talking Chico Xavier. How many books has he,
Oh, yeah,
psychographed? He started
yeah,
with one. You
yeah,
start with one message. You start with one book,
yeah, yeah.
and then you can
Uh,
continue through persistence.
yeah, that's beautiful. So on that aspect, let's talk a little bit about how patience can be a bit of giving ourselves in an altruistic behavior.
Absolutely great, because she does bring up the idea of patience being extremely important, and being a key component in altruistic behavior. And I think we can look at this in many different lens.
Uh-huh.
One that it's interesting to think about the patience is being patient, I think, with ourselves and with others as well, but also waiting for things and being patient for things to develop. We keep talking about this gradual progress and the persistence and the necessary, the resiliency. Patience is key behind that, because otherwise, if we don't have patience, if we become impatient with trying to improve ourselves, trying to improve others through altruistic acts, we're not going to carry them forward. We're not going to develop that habit, develop that skill. And
Mm-hmm.
patience is almost, let's say, like the fuel behind the machinery of altruistic behavior, because without it,
Interesting. Yeah.
you can't, the machine is not going to work, because you're just not going to reach all that you can reach if you don't have patience, and be kind to yourself as well as you're going, in this journey of self-development through altruistic acts.
Yeah. Can you give me this is going into your own personal interpretation of what patience is. Can you tell us perhaps an example of how being patient um, is an example of altruistic behavior and of that higher level, higher significance, which is giving yourself to the other? What could be some examples there, Yuri?
I think a good example of patience in regards to altruistic behavior is understanding and truly exemplifying that through our actions, that the sentence they say, in God's time. I think
Yeah.
a lot of the time, especially nowadays in this frantic world, everything is, right
Yeah.
now, or it's already too late. Everything is so fast paced, and we're becoming impatient, and that little monster of impatience is growing with us, because everything is instant. If we go on a website, it doesn't load in 3 seconds. Internet's slow. What is happening? If we
I
order something
know.
in the US, even like on Amazon, it's not here tomorrow. What's happening? Like,
Yeah.
everything is fostering this idea of this fast-paced environment. But with the again, I'm going to use the same term I used before, the treasures of the soul, like the true
Yeah.
treasures, right? They don't come like that, and they oftentimes, more often than not, they don't come when we expect them to come. So being like altruistic, I think the patient, that's why I said it's the fuel, because it's understanding and enacting the idea that
Mhm.
we are not in control of the things that we wish we were in control. And there's God's time. Things may want things to happen at certain, time. I'm helping this person, or I'm developing myself, but still not seeing the results. Why is that? This is supposed to have happened to yesterday, but things come in God's time. So I think the patience there is something that is connected to the altruistic behavior through, through this lens. At least that's my interpretation, or my take on this.
Yeah, and my thoughts would be that patience leads to I know um, in English may not be as impactful word as it is in Portuguese, but resignation or acceptance, right? Patience is the idea that you're aware of what's going on, but you accept that it may take a decade to get to achieve something, instead of that the opposite of it, that instant gratification that we've become as a Western society so used to. I love your example, by the way, of the same day or the second day delivery. And I have to tell you, I ordered something, not Amazon, and they said, okay, it's going to cost extra for immediate, right? So I said, okay, I will do that because I would like in 2 days, right? And well, it took 2 weeks for them to ship. So it was 2 days after it shipped, and it took two, but it was never apparent to me or in my expectation.
Uh-huh.
And I was so upset. So I was not very patient at all with that company that, in a way, provided me with information that was not as accurate or as tangible in our day and age, right? But what are the other aspects of giving yourself? I'm thinking perhaps one idea is can be as simple as learning to quiet yourself, right? To listen to the other, learn to even when you are the star of the show, if you will, have the light shine in others that were supporting actors to whatever you're doing, because you know that that person needs more than you to have the light shining on them. It also maybe has to do with just being there, right? You mentioned prayer,
Yes.
and I invited everybody to pray for somebody who has no idea you are praying for them. But what are the other things that we can do that are at our fingertips, but we forgot because of our life is full, so full of distractions and of responsibilities and worries on a daily basis that we forget to just center and be able to, as you're centered, to provide, to give of yourself.
Yeah, I great point, Marcia, because I do believe too that patience is this forgotten virtue, and as they
Hmm.
mentioned in the gospel according to Spiritism, this forgotten virtue that is so instrumental in, as Joanna uses this word instrumental, patience is instrumental, in acquiring the goods for the soul, the body, like all of those things. So it is such a pivotal thing that we often forget. And I think for being practical here, definitely taking some time and setting aside some time, like we already mentioned, to pray, but also some time, in quiet, and like in a quiet place, just being with ourselves, elevating our thoughts to God and just thinking of things and just basically slowing it down
Yeah,
to be with ourselves. Because nowadays, like I said, the frantic pace of everything
yeah,
and
yeah.
the demands and the worries, but not only that, the distractions as well. Because everything is achievable today, like if you want to spend 12 hours a day in front of the television, entertain, you can, you
Yes,
actually can find things that are gonna keep you entertained for 12 hours if you're sitting down on the couch and doing that. So there's so many things, like social media. That's another thing too, that it is so accessible, and it is so inviting, and it plays with things in our brains that we are not even aware. And those things, they can deviate us from the actual goal, and they can distract us from working on our patience and being more patient with ourselves, with others, and trying to understand things around us in a deeper way.
yeah. There is there is a book written by Kahneman is his last name. I think the title is Fast Thinking, Slow Thinking. Do you know
Daniel
that book?
Kahneman, I think.
Yes,
Kahneman or
yes,
something. Yes.
yes,
That-
yes. And it's a very interesting book because Kahneman brings us this idea that our brains, the fast brain, that fast-paced brain, is really for support on the fear-based type things, support you from things coming to get you. But for you to really rise up as a with the glories of humanity, it really requires you to slow down. And there are too many examples, but one example that he brings that is easy to comprehend is just multiply 355 times 1,899, right? And we go, whoa, no,
yes.
you can. You just need time. So for us to do things that requires us to really flourish in all of our humanity, we need to learn to slow down. And social media, unfortunately, it's the thief that steals from us, right? It steals our time, it steals our brain, steals our attention, our ability to focus. And so let's just, from a patient's perspective, let's learn to be patient, and let's be patient with ourselves, even as we say, I want to be on social media, but not today. Or let's put 1% decrease in time used in frivolity, right? Let's just try to be patient with ourselves as we become better. But Yuri, we are at time. I can't believe that we already spent all of our time talking because time just went by super fast. And I wanted to ask you this, right? We talked a little bit about Pope Francis. I'm a fan, and he he really um, discusses the idea, this contemporary life, right? This is day to day, and our craziness, our distractions, social media, and many other types of things that are here making our life not so easy. And he said that that Samaritan, the Good Samaritan, is the prototype of the fraternity and social friendship that creates the culture of encounter and build bridges of love among all. So I love to hear from you, but I part today with the idea, let us all base our role model in that Good Samaritan that practiced that act of altruism that not only stopped so he robbed of his time, right? He stopped from his journey and picked up that man on the road that was naked and unconscious, put on his horse. That means that he did not have a horse to drive on, went to an inn and treated the wounds and asked for the innkeeper to, as he paid, to take care of him until he could return. And I love that. Are we ready to stop and pay attention? So it goes hand in hand with that idea of patience and empathy. So, wanted to have your final words before we say goodbye today, Yuri.
Absolutely, great example. I think the what Pope Francis said too in the paradigm, and thinking the Samaritan also said that if he needs more, he's gonna come and pay. So like he really goes the extra mile, and it's such a good example of the costs that were associated with that act. And for us to talking about altruism from a psychological standpoint, connecting with the spiritist standpoint, and all of those things, I think it's my final words would be to encourage people to reflect, to be more patient with themselves, with others, and that in itself is charity already. And at the same time, remembering that it starts small. Start small. Start with 5 minutes. When I do my lectures, I always say, people say, I don't read anymore. I say, if you read one page per day, in 1 year, you will have read a book,
Yeah,
365 pages, right?
yeah.
One page. Who doesn't have 5 minutes today? So start small. Don't wait for big opportunities to have something, everything go right in your life to start to exercise altruism, because we have to start small, we have to start gradual, we have to start somewhere. And I'll give in a last piece related with psychology. A lot of studies have shown throughout the decades that altruistic behavior is infectious, in the point that example is everything. So the more we're engaging these acts, and the more we're going to inspire people around us to actually do those things too.
Oh, love it. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed our discussion today on generosity, charity, altruism, and how it may indeed help us achieve the sense of well-being, psychologically speaking, emotionally speaking, right? And from a perspective of societal well-being, that we contribute to that. So with that, Yuri, thank you so very much for being with me today. And
Thank you.
I see you everyone next week. Bye everyone.
Bye bye.